sacrificed if an autonomous car crashes. This is a new MIT Media Lab study. When the self-driving cars get into an accident, they'll be forced to decide who should die. They'll be programmed to choose one group over another when deciding where to crash when a crash cannot be avoided. These issues have become the main ethical problem for those designing the cars. Are you happy with this kind of triaging system? So young people should be favoured over old. The fewer casualties, the better.
I'm happy with the second one. The first one's very uncomfortable, and I was interested to note that this was made out of a consensus of sort of interviewing people to see what they thought, and people in Eastern European countries did not think that about valuing young people's lives over old people. But the thing that really fascinates me about this is that what is the security going to be like on the moral code of these self-driving cars? How hackable are they going to be? Can someone come along and hack a car to become a super selfish car that sort of mows everyone in its wake or always makes decisions in favour of the driver? I'd never considered this before. Incredible.
No.
What if it's a family, Rebecca, or a Maui dolphin, that was somehow in the road, or an Archie's frog?
You see those Maui dolphins on the road down the coast.
I'm sorry, the dolphin and the frog have got to go. The family can stay.
Would you buy a car that sacrificed your life or the lives of your family in favour of mowing into 15 cyclists? Or not? I'm in favour of not mowing into 15 cyclists. In other words, it sacrificed you, but not the person.
Considering that if I was in that position and I was about to hit cyclists, I would swerve, and I don't know if that would kill me or not, then I guess so. That I'm happy with that moral decision.
What? Yeah.
Really? Would you buy that car thinking, okay, well, if my number's up, the car will decide?
I wouldn't leave that in the hands of the car manufacturer for a start. You're going to let Microsoft or Google or Tesla or Elon Musk decide these things. These are the sorts of things that would need to be legislated and set in. So you can't buy a selfish car or a selfless car because the law would say this is the priorities that we've set in place.
Those people are going to be hacking the cars. Elon Musk is going to have a car that he's going to have one of those sort of dictator's cars that
Yeah, he won't be sacrificing himself in a
certainly not
driverless car. Otago Law Professor Colin Gavigan, who's the New Zealand Law Foundation Chair in Law and Emerging Technologies, makes another point. At what point does a child cross the threshold to having a less valuable life? Is it 16, 18? Is an infant's life more precious than a toddler's? And as for saving as many lives as possible, the car may decide that you, the driver, should plough into the oncoming truck rather than plough into the group of cyclists on the road. So these are almost impossible decisions, aren't they?
Absolutely. All it tells us is that the trolley problem still doesn't have a solution after all of... how long's it been since we came up with that one?
Yes, exactly. Damien, people like your idea of making Parliament nicer. And a texter says, would you invest in a company where half the directors opposed what the other half proposed regardless of merit?
That's a great point.
And I know there are all sorts of opinions coming in about driverless cars. But the media drive out opinions. It's time they understood that, says Colin, regarding what you were talking about before. The Westminster system is to blame. They're not called the agreement. They're not called the agreement. Should pre-read these texts more, but it's hard on the fly. Hey, lovely to see both of you, and thank you for great comments today.
Thank you, Jim.
Rebecca White has been with us, and Damien Christie as well.
Thank you, Jim.
Look forward to seeing you both again soon. That's us for the day. Thank you for your company, everybody. We are most certainly back tomorrow, and Checkpoint is coming up with Lisa Owen. See you tomorrow.
Ki te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, Olympian Hamish Carter resigns from High Performance Sport New Zealand after revealing he leaked confidential information to the former national track cycling coach, Anthony Peden. America's terrorism task force launches a manhunt after intercepting 8 pipe bomb packages. And former Conservative Party leader Colin Craig isn't ruling out a return to politics. And an Auckland City Councillor has a close call with one of the city's new electric scooters and says it's only a matter of time before someone is killed by one.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The former Olympic triathlon champion Hamish Carter has resigned from High Performance Sport New Zealand after revealing he leaked confidential information to Anthony Peden, the national track cycling coach. Peden resigned suddenly from the role in May. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
Hamish Carter has confirmed that he passed on feedback from team members to Peden, feedback which was supposed to be anonymous. A recent review of Cycling New Zealand by the former Solicitor General Michael Heron QC was highly critical of Peden's behaviour and identified a culture of bullying, a lack of accountability and an inappropriate relationship within a dysfunctional high-performance program in the sport. Carter, who won Olympic gold as a triathlete at the 2004 Athens Games, was employed as a campaign consultant manager by HPSNZ. In a statement, he apologised to athletes and staff affected by what he described as a genuine mistake, saying he accepts full responsibility for his actions. This is Stephen Hewson.
The lawyer for whale oil blogger Cameron Slater says his client won't be too bothered by today's judgment in his defamation case against Colin Craig. The former Conservative Party leader sued Mr Slater for posts he made on his whale oil blog about Mr Craig and his relationship with his former press secretary Rachel McGregor. Mr Slater countersued Mr Craig for statements in a leaflet sent out to 1.6 million households in 2015. Justice Toogood has found that Mr Slater did defame Mr Craig by making untrue statements about him, but he dismissed Mr Slater's counterclaim. Mr Slater's lawyer, Brian Henry, says his client won't challenge the decision.
I don't think Mr Slater is too worried over the booklets and things like that on his reputation. He's a big boy and he understands how the world works.
Brian Henry. Among Justice Toogood's rulings, he found Mr Craig sexually harassed Ms McGregor. 2 more suspicious packages have been found in the United States mail services addressed to the Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters. A total of 8 pipe bomb packages have now been intercepted, targeting high-profile Liberal politicians and officials, including Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, along with CNN's offices in New York. The President, Donald Trump, has described the mailed bombs as an attack on democracy. The BBC's Chris Buckler reports.
Speaking in Wisconsin, President Trump's often aggressive rhetoric at political rallies was replaced with an attempt to take a moral high ground. He said people must stop comparing rivals to historical villains or suggesting they are morally defective. Critics will inevitably say that the president should take his own advice. Mr Trump, who regularly encourages crowds to boo the media, singled out journalists for criticism. He claimed they needed to end what he described as their endless hostility.
Chris Buckler in Washington. And investigators also say they're trying to track down a suspicious package they believe was addressed to the former Vice President Joe Biden. The Prime Minister insists she made the decision there should be no regional fuel tax in cities other than Auckland long before she declared it in the House. Jacinda Ardern has been accused of making policy on the hoof when she said yesterday there'd be no other regional fuel taxes while she's in office. That was the first some ministers in Parliament had heard of the new pledge. The Transport Minister says there have been discussions among ministers in past months, but this was the first time Ms Ardern had said it publicly. Ms Ardern says it should have come as no surprise to any other minister.
Oh no, that's been discussed before, as has been made mention of. We've had that conversation in Cabinet Committee. It's already in legislation, so I think that's pretty clear that there was no intention of this government to go down that track, and what I've highlighted is that there's no intention from me as Prime Minister to go down that track as Prime Minister.
Jacinda Ardern. Safety regulations may soon be on the cards for the new electric scooter sharing scheme. The Auckland Mayor, Phil Goff, wants his council and Auckland Transport to look at their safety after scooter riders filed 14 injury claims with ACC in the first week of the new service in Auckland and Christchurch. They can travel up to 27 kilometres an hour, they're allowed on footpaths and riders don't have to wear helmets. Mr Goff says he doesn't want people to stop using e-scooters, but regulation is needed before someone is seriously hurt or even killed by them. The New Zealand share market has recovered slightly in a volatile session as global tensions, trade worries and risk unsettles investors around the world. The market was down nearly 1.8% in earlier trading before bargain hunters drove prices back up this afternoon. The NZX Top 50 Index ended the day down just 0.9% or by 74 points to 8,568. That's much better than the benchmark Australian ASX 200 Index, which is down more than 2% this afternoon, while the Asian share markets are also facing a rough ride. The turbulence follows a tumble in technology stocks that inflicted the largest daily decline on Wall Street since 2011, wiping out all its gains for the year. It's 5:05. Sport. The All Blacks have sprung a major surprise by naming Damien Mckenzie to start at fullback in the third Bledisloe Cup test in Yokohama on Saturday. Coach Steve Hansen has shuffled Ben Smith to the wing to make room for Mckenzie, who's generally been used as an impact player off the bench. Clay Wilson reports.
In another surprise, TJ Perenara will start at halfback instead of Aaron Smith, who usually gets to wear the number 9 jersey. Perenara has been in good form this season, and his selection is no doubt a warning to Smith that he's not at the top of his game. Hansen's made 5 starting personnel changes from the team which pipped South Africa 32-30 in Pretoria 3 weeks ago to complete the defence of their Rugby Championship crown. Ardie Savea and Liam Squire are the starting flankers in place of injured pairs Sam Cane and Shannon Frizzell. Lock Brodie Retallick is named on the bench, having recently overcome a shoulder injury, while Sonny Bill Williams is named at second 5 for what will be his 50th test. This is Clay Wilson.
The Warriors will get to enjoy home comforts in the early rounds of next year's National Rugby League competition. 4 of their opening 6 games are in New Zealand, with a rare first-round home game at Mount Smart Stadium against the Canterbury Bulldogs to kick off their season on March the 16th. The Silver Ferns defender Sulu Fitzpatrick will captain the New Zealand side at the Fast 5 Netball World Series in Melbourne this weekend. Fast 5 is the shortened version of the 7-player format, and the competition includes teams from Australia, England, Jamaica, Malawi and South Africa. That's the news.
New Zealanders share their economic hopes.
There's some fantastic soil and regions and climate up here that's going to be really beneficial for horticulture.
A stark warning about world trade.
So unless these issues are resolved before then, we're back to the Wild Western trade.
A new government pledge on regional fuel tax.
There will be no other regional fuel taxes while I am Prime Minister.
Total policy making on the hoof.
Keeping up the pace. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy Espiner, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the chair of the Global Commission on Drug Policy, former Swiss President Ruth Dreifuss, on why a drug-free world is impossible and effective regulation is not admitting defeat. And after 10, philosopher and novelist Kwame Anthony Appiah on how the identities that shape our world are riddled with contradiction. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather now through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells, then a few showers this evening, clearing in Auckland and Coromandel tomorrow morning, and fine spells developing. Waikato to Wellington, including the central high country, a few showers turning to rain this evening, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Gisborne to Wairarapa, fine, but showers developing in Wairarapa this evening and elsewhere tomorrow morning, clearing in the afternoon, apart from the Hawke's Bay and Gisborne ranges. For Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, rain easing to showers this evening, then clearing tomorrow. Isolated afternoon showers inland for Canterbury tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, rain with heavy falls clearing this evening, a few showers developing tomorrow. Otago, rain easing to isolated showers this evening, then clearing about the coast tomorrow. Southland and Fiordland, a few showers clearing tomorrow morning, and the Chatham Islands cloudy with occasional showers tomorrow. It's 9 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. And coming up, Olympian Hamish Carter's resignation from High Performance Sport New Zealand. Colin Craig joins me in the studio. And the e-scooters terrorising Auckland. A councillor says it's only a matter of time before someone is killed. But we begin tonight in the United States, where the Terrorism Task Force has been called in and a huge manhunt has been launched. This comes after a spate of pipe bomb packages were sent to high-profile Liberal politicians, including Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. 8 pipe bomb packages have now been intercepted, and the latest 2 were addressed to the Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Earlier, the Time Warner building in New York was evacuated after a package that was addressed to the former CIA head, John Brennan, was delivered to CNN. And investigators are also reportedly trying to track down a suspicious package they believe was addressed to the former Vice President, Joe Biden. President Donald Trump has described it as an attack on democracy, while at the same time calling for more civility in politics. With more, here's the ABC's North America correspondent, Connor Duffy.
The FBI is saying that they were rudimentary but functional. That means they were explosive devices. And to have projectiles, I mean, that sounds like a fire alarm here. We'll keep you posted on that.
CNN was reporting on suspicious packages sent to President Barack Obama in Washington and former First Lady Hillary Clinton in New York when it became clear the cable news network had itself been threatened.
But to have projectiles, that is a
device addressed to CNN contributor and former CIA director John Brennan, with his name spelled incorrectly, meant the station had to evacuate and surrounding streets were shut down. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio says authorities are treating it as an act of terror.
This clearly is an act of terror, attempting to undermine our free press and leaders of this country.
The same person or group is believed to have attempted to send a package to former Attorney General Eric Holder, but listed the wrong address. Another package was found at the home of billionaire George Soros, who funds a number of left-wing causes, and there are reports that package may have been delivered in person. All of the packages listed, obviously falsely, Democratic Congresswoman and former senior official Debbie Wasserman Schultz as the sender. Her office was searched by authorities too, and it's believed the package meant for Eric Holder had the wrong address and may have been returned to her address. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio deployed extra police but urged people to go about their business.
We, at this time, do not have other credible and specific threats against locations in New York City.
All of the devices were sent in manila envelopes with the name and addresses typed, and the devices have been described as similar. It's not yet known if they were capable of exploding. At the same press conference, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, whose brother is a prominent CNN presenter, revealed his staff had identified a suspicious package and that he wouldn't be surprised if there were others.
What they are trying to do is scare us and destabilize us, and we will not allow that to happen. We are New Yorkers. We are smart. We are tough. We are resilient.
The President, Donald Trump, and Vice President Mike Pence both condemned the mail attacks.
As we speak, the packages are being inspected by top explosive experts, and a major federal investigation is now underway. The full weight of our government is being deployed to conduct this investigation and bring those responsible for these despicable acts to justice.
And of course, that is Donald Trump there ending Connor Duffy's report. The fallout from a damning review into the culture within Cycling New Zealand's high-performance environment has claimed another casualty. It has been announced today that former leading Kiwi triathlete Hamish Carter, who won Olympic gold at the Athens Games in 2004, has resigned from his position at High Performance Sport New Zealand. Now, Carter has been confirmed as the HPSNZ employee who leaked confidential documents to former national track sprint coach Anthony Peden, who was a central figure in the review released last week. Now, the review found a culture of bullying, poor behaviour, a lack of accountability and an inappropriate coach-athlete relationship. Now, we have tried unsuccessfully to reach Hamish Carter this afternoon, but sports reporter Clay Wilson joins me now to discuss his resignation. Clay, were you surprised? Does this news come as a shock?
Well, Hamish Carter's a very revered athlete in New Zealand. He's very well known for that gold medal he won at Athens in 2004. New Zealand finished second in that race as well, so it's very well remembered. So I have to say I was surprised to hear that Hamish Carter was the man, the person that had leaked these documents to Anthony Peden. But I guess as a result of what he's done, he's now fallen on his sword. So, yeah, it was definitely a surprise to hear that he was the person.
So what else do we know about the situation and how it played out? You say he fell on his sword. Is it his choice to go, or do we think he's kind of pushed out the door?
Well, High Performance Sport have been clear in their statement today, saying that this was totally Carter's decision. There was no agreement or settlement reached. So this harks back to perhaps the football review we saw earlier this year, the incidents with the football ferns, because CEO Andy Martin and football ferns coach Andreas Haraf both reportedly received big payouts as they went out the door. So High Performance Sport going out of their way to say this was his decision, we didn't push him out the door.
And that he didn't get anything, no money.
No money at all.
No money on the way out. So what's Hamish Carter saying?
Well, Hamish Carter's released a statement as part of the high performance statement. He's basically apologised to the staff, to the athletes. He said he accepts full responsibility. The interesting part is he says this was a genuine mistake. Now, what exactly that means, I guess, is for everybody's interpretation. Whether he genuinely accidentally sent it to Peden, or that it was just the wrong thing to do. He decided
We don't know anything about those circumstances, about how the information was transmitted. You know, as you say, was it a false push on the email, or was it handed over in a meeting, or what?
Yeah, no, we don't. I mean, there's no indications that it was accidental, a slip of a button in an email or something of that nature. But yeah, I guess Carter, he is the man, and he has to really go. So that's what's happened.
And he has said what? He's not going to talk to us about it or anybody else, and why?
No, he's basically gone to ground. So we don't know. We don't know why. I guess he probably wants to hide away for a while. He has said he wants to come back into sport at some point, and that he's very disappointed to be leaving a role in sport. But I guess this is a pretty damning thing to be involved in, especially considering what was substantiated by the review. And to leak confidential documents like that, the athletes and staff have given in confidence to someone like Peden, who, of course, we know it was revealed about him in the review and what he was up to during his time. So, not a great look for Hamish Carter. We'll see if he comes back.
Yeah, interesting that he notes in his statement, he says he's not going to be making any further comments because, in essence, he says he's concerned about the athletes who are working towards the Tokyo Games, doesn't want to take the focus away from them.
I think it's just a way of him, explaining why he's not commenting, but I think probably just doesn't want to comment because of the nature of what's happened.
Yeah, how controversial it is. Hey, let's change tack. Let's talk about the All Black squad that has been announced for the test against Australia. Any surprises in the team selection?
Yeah, a couple of surprises actually, both in the backs. Damien Mckenzie has been named to start at fullback, and that's interesting because Geordie Barrett has got that slot in the past when Ben Smith's moved to the wing. So Ben Smith again moved to the wing. Waisaki Naholo comes out. Damien Mckenzie comes in, and he's mostly come off the bench. So a big chance for him to really stake a claim as a starter in the All Blacks. We also see TJ Perenara starting at halfback. So Aaron Smith, obviously the incumbent number 9, but he comes out onto the bench. TJ Perenara been really good form, so he gets a reward for that form and gets a start.
Is this kind of, you can afford to have a bit of experimentation because you've got the Bledisloe Cup in your back pocket, so you can have a crack at some other combinations?
I think there's a little bit of that, especially with this halfback selection, giving Perenara a rare start and saying to Aaron Smith as well, your spot as the number 1 halfback in this team is not necessarily locked in, so just to give him perhaps a little bit of a warning that he needs to keep his standards high.
And the fact that they do have the Bledisloe Cup secured, I mean, does that have any effect on their motivation when they go into this game?
Well, I guess you can't help but think it's got to have some effect because they're not playing for the Bledisloe Cup, which they, of course, they hold very dear. But, I mean, this is the first test of their end-of-year tour, and they'll want to start well. I mean, it wouldn't be a great start to a big end-of-year tour where they're going to have a big game against England in a couple of weeks to lose to Australia, an Australian team that didn't have a great rugby championship, to be fair. So to lose to them, and just the standards of this All Blacks team in general. I mean, they don't like to lose. They know that no one in this country likes to lose. Yeah. No one likes to see them lose. So I don't imagine they'll be too much lacking in motivation.
Thanks for that. That is Clay Wilson there with all the latest. Hamish Carter, you would have heard there, has resigned from his position at High Performance Sport New Zealand. That is after he was outed as the person who leaked confidential information to the former national track sprint coach Anthony Peden. Now, former Conservative Party leader Colin Craig won't rule out a return to politics after the High Court found that whale oil blogger Cameron Slater defamed him. But that same 200-plus page ruling also found that Mr Craig was guilty of moderately serious sexual harassment of his former press secretary Rachel McGregor, and that he'd paid her a substantial amount of money so that she wouldn't complain. Now, it's hard to keep up with who is suing who when it comes to Colin Craig, but in this case, he claimed that Cameron Slater had published about 14 seriously untrue things about him. In the end, though, the court found only 2 of the claims were defamatory. Mr Slater countersued him, but that claim was dismissed. So I asked Colin Craig if he really thought that this was a win for him.
Well, it is a win, not as good a one as I'd like, because obviously there were other statements as well that I was looking to be found defamatory. But all in all, I sued him. I win on some of my things. He sued me, and he wins on none of his things. So overall, it's a win.
Well, I did a bit of a rough count. There was, I think, about 14 particular things that he said about you that you claimed were defamatory. Only 2 upheld. So
Yes.
if that's victory, what does losing look like?
Losing would have been him winning. Anything that would have been particularly unpalatable. For me, there are 3 things that I really wanted out of it. One was to find that he had defamed me, which is a finding. Secondly was that he had been part of an attack on me to remove me as leader of the Conservative Party. That's a clear finding, and I'm happy with that. The third thing, and not so important, but I still would have liked to have got some award for damages, which hasn't happened. So
nobody gets anything, money-wise.
yeah,
Nobody gets anything.
Well, costs are obviously going to be in play, and I'll do better than him on that, but I still feel it ought to have been awarded some damages, because at the end of the day he did say things about me that were not only untrue but defamatory.
Yeah, but he did say a lot of things about you that the court has found were true. In broad brushstrokes, they were true.
Yeah.
And some of those things are pretty serious. They say that the finding is that you actually did sexually harass Rachel McGregor with unwanted, unwelcome written messages. So what do you say about that behaviour?
Well, at the
on
end
your part?
Well, at the end of the day, as I say, I'm happy with the win as the big picture. Then you go down into the detail, and I've got to look at, do I appeal or contest some of that detail? So to give an example, which comes through in that, Mr Slater made the claim that I had sent sext messages and that he had copies of them. That was not true. I hadn't sent sext messages. He didn't have copies of them. But the judge has said, but because there was some communications by way of 2 letters, he considered that close enough. Now, I don't think that's right.
You're fudging it here. This is what the court has found, and you can't cherry pick the bits that you like about what the court has found and what you don't like.
But that's not fudging.
The court has said to you that you were guilty of moderately serious sexual harassment of Ms McGregor, and that you sent to her unwelcome, unsolicited written communication. Would you like to apologise for that behaviour?
Well, first of all, as I say, I'm happy with the overall win. That's good for me. In terms of the detail, and one thing I do have to say is obviously there are other court cases before the court, so I have to be careful not to prejudice that. So I won't go into a whole lot of detail. So I'm happy with the overall win, and I'm happy that I come out ahead. So
in the end, haven't you, what you have got is now a laundry list confirmed by the court of inappropriate behaviour by you in a position of power in relation to someone who was working for you at the time, you, a man who was married and had political aspirations. We now have a list from the court of what things that you did and didn't do, and it doesn't make for great reading.
Well, look, that's the detail within the bigger picture. The big picture is I'm happy I won. The details within that, some of those I am not happy with, and so I have to decide to what extent I can live with the win or not. Some people say, well, quit while you're ahead, but within this are a lot of details, and some of those details I'm not happy with. I don't think that is the right outcome. And so I have to look at those and decide whether I want to appeal those findings or not.
OK, I'm sure you have seen what's been unfolding with the MP Jamie Lee Ross and questions raised about his behaviour. Do you see any parallels between your behaviour and some of the behaviour we're hearing about Jamie Lee Ross?
Well, look, I don't know his situation well enough to comment, so I won't comment on his situation. I think that'd be unfair. What I know is my situation, and in terms of what happened here, I'm happy with the win. Within this are details that I'm not happy with. Some of those things I have to accept are true. As I think you probably already know, I have apologised. And so I've got to look at this in context and say, well, what are these things am I happy with and will I live with? And what are these things would make me want to appeal the decision?
Do you still harbour political aspirations?
Well, I think it's interesting, this harbour political aspirations thing. For me, it's always been about issues. I find myself motivated and energised by issues and things that I care about and things that other people care about and want me to represent. But
do you want to go to Parliament in order to pursue those issues? Do you want to be an MP?
I'm not unhappy to do that, but it's not a burning desire.
So you're not gonna follow that path anymore? You're not going to form another political party? You're not going to stand again?
You never say never. There are a lot of things about politics I enjoy. I like engaging on issues and I like debate. And although very inexperienced, I think on some of those things I accounted for myself quite well and gave it a good shot. Other things I probably didn't do as well as more experienced people would have done. But there are things about it that I like and I enjoy. And there's other things like people wanting to go after you and attack you and take you out as a leader, which the court said did happen. That's hard to deal with. So coming back to your question, do I harbour aspirations? No, but I still care about the issues. And if making change on issues means getting back into the political arena at some stage, I wouldn't rule it out.
And do you think it's conceivable that you could do this with all of this information about you and your actions out there?
Oh, sure. I mean, nobody's perfect. And there are lots of people who are voted into all sorts of different positions who have done far worse. So I don't think that's the determining factor. For me at the moment...
So not great behaviour, but not bad enough to keep you out of Parliament?
Well, look, at the end of the day, nobody's behaving perfectly, and I think we all know that. I look at this, I'm happy with the win. Details within it, I have to decide what to do about. I am disappointed by that decision that I've sexually harassed somebody. That to me is hard to stack up because obviously it's about whether something's welcomed or not. And the feedback at the time was, hey, yeah, thanks for writing me a letter. Now, loved it, rereading it.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, are you saying that your attention wasn't unwelcome? Is that what you're saying?
That was one of
because the court says otherwise.
You've got the judgment right, and that was one of the contests in the case. And so that's one of the issues when I look at this decision and I've got to say, well, do I quit while I'm ahead or do I go back and look at some of the things? That will be one of the issues I have to consider.
But if you pause for a minute, Mr. Craig, and think about this, aren't you just articulating everything that the Me Too movement would say is wrong about men in your position?
No, I don't think that at all.
You didn't just do a bit of victim blaming there?
Why would you say that?
Well, you seem to be suggesting that the attention was welcome, where the court categorically and clearly says between 2012 and 2014 it was unwelcome attention.
Well, look, I'm not doing that, and I think that's wrong. What we're talking about here in terms of the judgment is I come out ahead. There's details within it that I am concerned about, and that finding, the finding that it was unwelcome, is a outcome that I'm concerned about. Now, obviously the judge drew a line. He said up to a certain point in time it was welcome. After that it wasn't. That's where he felt the line ought to be drawn. I don't agree with that, and obviously my case was that I didn't agree with that. Whether I accept the judgment and say, well, that's where he said it lay, or whether I challenge that judgment isn't a decision I've made yet, but it's one that I will think about.
And we've had a statement from the Rachel McGregor Trust, which has welcomed Justice Toogood's finding. Trustee Nicola Taylor says it puts it beyond any reasonable doubt or argument that Mr Craig indeed sexually harassed Rachel McGregor during the course of her employment with him. Now, Auckland Council has ordered an urgent safety review into its electric scooters after a city councillor was nearly taken out by one. Hundreds of the bright green e-scooters have been rolled out in both Auckland and Christchurch. That happened just over a week ago, so you've probably spotted them on the streets there. They are causing some major problems for some motorists and pedestrians, and the scooters so far are responsible for 14 ACC claims. Now, the company behind them is putting that down to a few teething problems and says they will revolutionise the way that people move around cities. Overseas, though, the e-scooters have been banned from footpaths in Madrid, and a class action lawsuit has been launched in the US, with companies there accused of gross negligence. We sent our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Nick Monroe to investigate the e-scooter invasion.
Lunchtime on Auckland's waterfront, and young and old, everyone's hitching a ride on an electric scooter. I hopped on one down by the viaduct to join hordes of fellow riders zipping between meetings, grabbing lunch or just going for a cruise.
They're cool because, you know, you're not going to go out and buy an electric scooter, but out here you can just ride them and they're not like overly expensive. It's what, 18 an hour.
This will be my second time. Yeah, I had it on the weekend. My old man was up from Dunedin and just loved it. Like a 55-year-old man, he was like a kid again.
Yesterday I used it to get to the gym and back to work, so a couple of times now. They've been pretty fun, pretty useful. They go real quick, so.
What's the fastest you've gotten up to?
Like 32 or 33.
The US company Lime is behind the scooters. They put 600 in Auckland and 400 in Christchurch last week. They're easy enough to use. Riders download an app which uses GPS to locate and unlock a scooter. They cost 18 cents a minute to ride, and then you can leave them wherever you like for the next person. But the Lime scooters have left a bitter taste for some pedestrians who say they're more of a lemon.
I think they're an underfoot nuisance and shouldn't be on the footpath. They go too fast and they need to be regulated in some way, I feel.
What are the biggest concerns you have around them?
Well, from what I've experienced, they come up behind you, you can't hear them, and I just think they're quite dangerous.
Well, the biggest problem is, I guess, that you don't hear them coming, and you know, no one needs a licence or anything for them. They're just zipping up and down the footpaths and in and out of people. They're going to hurt somebody.
Wayne King was on Queen Street when a scooter came flying towards him at what he reckons was nearly 30 kilometres an hour.
He sort of went right between my legs, which, considering the height of the handlebars, could have been a lot more damage than it actually was.
I'm relieved for you.
So am I, but I'm sure it's going to end badly for someone.
Now, these Lime scooters go pretty quick. I'm travelling along next to the motorway. It may not be motorway speed, but I've just hit 22 kilometres an hour. And I tell you, with no protective gear, that feels pretty quick. That's not even the full speed, though. They are capable of getting up to 27 kilometres an hour and faster if you're going downhill. Although the app tells riders to wear a helmet and stay off footpaths, no one we spoke to was following the rules.
I probably wouldn't usually ride it without a helmet, so just because I'm trialling it, which is a bit naughty, I'm out with a helmet, but I definitely wouldn't recommend riding these without a helmet.
Everyone that I've seen riding them so far, I mean, it says on here, wear a helmet, but a lot of people aren't wearing a helmet. People just use them to get to work, maybe get the groceries, take some Instagram photos, stuff like that.
The San Francisco MTA impounded dozens of scooters.
E-scooters are causing mayhem in the United States. 2 riders are reported to have died there in crashes. There have been crackdowns in Spain, and they're banned from roads and footpaths in the UK. Back home, Auckland's Mayor Phil Goff says technology has moved quicker than regulations, and he's ordered Auckland Transport and the council to urgently look at better safety options. Lime's New Zealand launcher Hank Rowe says they'll work with the council to solve any issues during their 3-month trial here.
At this point, the NZTA has given the notion that we are able to operate without helmets. We are able to ride scooters without requiring a helmet. That process may change, and we are open to that process and want to be part of that. If there is any decisions to be made, we're the first share scooter operator in New Zealand, and we want to be a part of that process to make sure that this is a long-term positive for the country.
And he says Lime's open to a possible speed limit on the scooters.
We would have to discuss that at length. Scooters, the speed of scooters, or the regulation that could be put into place would be interesting, and we're still not into that process yet. When that happens, when or if that happens, we will be more than willing to discuss it at the time.
Louise Baker knows all about e-scooters. She's a transport strategist specialising in them and is confident they can be used properly here.
They're new to us. A lot of us never have been on an e-scooter before. We jumped on one when they arrived last week. So the risks, I guess, if you're not looking where you're going or you're not checking your terrain as you're coming down those curbs, you could potentially fall off or hurt yourself.
She says New Zealand can learn from mistakes made overseas.
If somebody's jumping on a Lime scooter instead of in an Uber, then that's going to be less emissions and less traffic on the roads.
Lime aren't the only ones eyeing up New Zealand as an e-scooter destination. Another 2,500 scooters are due to hit Auckland streets in the next couple of months. And councils here are scrambling to get ready for their arrival and ensure they help solve commuter chaos rather than creating chaos among commuters. I tāmaki makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Nita Blake Person, aho.
And we will talk to Councillor Christine Fletcher about her close encounter with a Lime of the scooter kind after 6 this evening. We'd love to hear your feedback on that story. Have you had any problems with those scooters? You can text us in on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or Facebook us at Checkpoint. Email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Coming up later in the show, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince promises journalist Jamal Khashoggi's killers will be brought to justice. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have touched down in Tonga for a flying overnight visit, and a leopard seal is stalking rowers in Auckland's Waitemata Harbour. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the news.
Can get this thing to go up. Okay. The former Olympic triathlon champion Hamish Carter has resigned from High Performance Sport New Zealand after revealing he leaked confidential information to former track cycling coach Anthony Peden. Carter passed on feedback from team members on Peden, which was supposed to be anonymous. A subsequent review of Cycling New Zealand identified a culture of bullying, poor behaviour, lack of accountability and an inappropriate relationship within a dysfunctional high-performance program. 2 more suspicious packages have been found in the United States mail services addressed to the Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters. A total of 8 pipe bomb packages have now been intercepted, targeting high-profile Liberal politicians and officials, including Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, along with CNN's offices in New York. The President, Donald Trump, has described the mailed bombs as an attack on democracy. The Prime Minister insists she made the decision there should be no regional fuel taxes in cities other than Auckland long before she declared it in the House. Jacinda Ardern has been accused of making policy on the hoof when she said yesterday there'd be no other regional fuel taxes while she's in office. That was the first some ministers in Parliament had heard of the new pledge, but Ms Ardern says it should have come as no surprise. The New Zealand share market has recovered slightly in a volatile session as global tensions, trade worries and risk unsettles investors around the world. The market was down nearly 1.8% in earlier trading before bargain hunters drove prices back up this afternoon. The NZX Top 50 Index ended the day down just 0.9%, much better than across the Tasman, where share values have been down by 2%. And safety regulations may soon be on the cards for the new electric scooter sharing scheme. The Auckland Mayor, Phil Goff, wants a look at rider safety after 14 ACC injury claims in the first week of the new service in Auckland and Christchurch. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Thanks, Katrina. Turning now to the business news with Nona Peltier. AMP selling most of its New Zealand operations as it does a bit of a revamp. Why is it doing it?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, I suppose. One of them is there's a trend over in Australia for banks and other types of financial services companies to streamline their operations, and a lot of concern ahead of what regulations might be imposed following the Australian Royal Commission there. Now, so some companies, AMP is probably one of the worst that has come out from the inquiry there. I mean, they admitted to providing services to customers that customers never got. So they charged them for them, but they never delivered them. And then lied to the regulators about that. So their brand has certainly been tarnished by that commission. And regulations are likely to be imposed. So getting ahead of this is one way that some market analysts are seeing this as a reason why the AMP would act now ahead of any kind of change. And, you know, I suppose this is the sort of thing they decided they were going to review this at the beginning of the year. I spoke with the local managing director of AMP New Zealand. He's going to stay on for the duration, and they're going to also be listing their wealth management business here in New Zealand later next year, about the second half.
So what does it mean in practical terms? In New Zealand, are they just going to be here in name only, really?
I think the brand will be here, will be owned by a British-based company that has other brands that are known to New Zealanders like AXA, is an example of the other ones they own. A few others, including Bupa.
Yeah, Bupa. Yeah, gotcha.
I don't have that insurance policy there. And Royal and Sun Alliance, so Bupa, Buppa, you know who I'm talking about.
All the B's there.
All the B's, that's right. So they are known to New Zealand, and there's no reason why they wouldn't be able to manage the AMP brand just as well as the others.
Yeah. Hey, it was a bit rock and roll on the markets today as well.
It sure was. It definitely was. And we saw that overnight. So it started really, we saw Asia nervous. Yesterday we saw that Asia was nervous. Then London opened and more nerves. And then by the time New York opened, the NASDAQ finished up the day more than 4%. That is a correction for sure in the market. A correction is generally thought of as where a market falls 10% below its high. And that basically wiped out all the gains that Wall Street saw this year. And when New Zealand opened, it opened really weak. We were down 1.8% at one point earlier in the day, but we finished up much better. And that's in comparison to Australia, which was down more than 2%, also in correction territory there. And Asia's looking pretty nervous. And part of that reason is that the company reporting season in the United States has failed to meet expectations. Now, you top that on top of everything else with the Saudi Arabia issues, the Italian budget, the pre-Brexit talks, and of course the underlying trade concerns, which have really caused jitters throughout Asia, particularly around the Chinese share market and how those companies are performing. So overall, not a very nice picture. Do we expect the volatility to continue? Did I say hostility? Might be the same thing.
One and the same.
Yes. I think we can probably expect to see that for a while.
Give us the numbers on the New Zealand dollar before you head out the door.
Okay, so our top 50 index, it was down nearly 0.9%. That's 74 points to 8,568. NZ dollar 65.2, that's steady at 92.1 Australian and 50.6 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Appreciate it. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have touched down in Tonga for a flying overnight visit. King Tupou VI will welcome the couple with a reception and dinner tonight at Consular House. They will stay at the Royal Villa. Now, this is one of the royal residences in Nuku'alofa. Tomorrow, they will meet with Prime Minister Akalisi Pohiva and visit forest reserves and a handcraft centre. Now, Mary Fonua is the managing editor of Matangi Tonga and has been following the royals from the airport to Nuku'alofa. Malo elele, Mary, how are you?
Yes, hello. Yes, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have arrived safely in Tonga, and there's been a lot of excitement on the arrival. So
who's excited, Mary? Who's out there and excited about them?
Well, all of the school children were lined up on the road completely from the airport right through to the villa, which is a distance of several kilometres, and the children were single file on both sides of the road, and they all had flags or were waving. Some of them even had Union Jacks, and when we got to Palihaki from Loto Tonga, which is the centre of Tongatapu Island, the women had put down tapa cloths on the road so that the royal vehicles could drive over them. And they often do this for the king when he comes to the agricultural show. But the tapa went for a very long way right through into Palihaki, and there were children sitting along the edges of the tapa and more flags and more waving. And it was rather lovely. So I think, you see how many young people there are in Tonga when you see them lined single file beside the road, and, you wonder about their future. And I think this is something that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are very interested in, is the youth of the Commonwealth. And
I see that
you see that reflected in their programs the next day.
I saw that Meghan Markle was wearing a red dress, so I'm sure that delighted some people. A tip to the
Tongan red, same colour as the red carpet and same colour as the Tongan flag. So long sleeve, very well fitted dress, flared and dark shoes, and Harry was in a light coloured suit. And they were met at the airport by Her Royal Highness Princess Angelica Latufui-Peka, who's the only daughter of King Tupou and Queen Nanasi Pao. And she met them and escorted them to the VIP shelter where they waited for a very short period of time and then got on the road. And they've gone to the villa, as you said, where they're getting ready for the royal reception tonight.
How tightly do you
have an audience?
How tightly do you think things are going to be controlled, Mary? Because you would have seen the sort of hubbub when she went to the markets in Fiji and they ended up rushing her out because the crowds were too big. Do you know if any special measures are being taken in Tonga?
Yes, well, they're not going to have anything quite like that because Tonga is a kingdom and the culture, has a respect for royals. So Tongans know how to behave around royals, and they're usually on their best behaviour, and they show deference and respect as part of the culture. It's almost a built-in thing here. But the program is probably more formal than what we saw in Fiji, and so they're being met and escorted, and everyone's very polite. And you see that on the road. People were letting them through, and I think you'll see that tomorrow. They'll make a courtesy call on the Prime Minister, and then they go to the Whaonilua Centre for the youth exhibition, and there'll be a little bit of walk around there looking at the stalls, but that whole area will be very controlled, so only people who are supposed to be there will be there. So I don't think you'll get anything like an open market situation.
All right, great to talk to you, Mary. That's Mary Whonua, who is reporting there from Tonga. The Duke and Duchess fly out from Tonga tomorrow and will be in Sydney for the end of the Invictus Games before their 4-day visit to Wellington, Abel Tasman, Auckland and Rotorua. Now, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has vowed that the killers of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi will be brought to justice. It's the first time he's publicly commented on the killing, which has sparked global condemnation. He's also defiantly told international investors at a major conference in Riyadh that the furor over Mr Khashoggi's death at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul would not derail the kingdom's reform drive. The BBC's Tim Wilcox has more from Riyadh.
At the centre of a diplomatic whirlwind, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman swept into a Riyadh conference. Up until now, he'd never spoken publicly about the death of Jamal Khashoggi.
The incident that took place is very painful for all Saudis, especially ordinary Saudi citizens, and I believe it is painful for any human in the world. Today, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is taking all legal measures to complete investigations jointly with the Turkish government to reach results and bring those guilty to justice.
After denying everything, Saudi Arabia finally admitted killing Mr Khashoggi, a former royal insider, in its consulate in Istanbul. The foreign minister said it was a rogue operation, but few believe that. Even the meeting between Jamal Khashoggi's son and the Crown Prince looked like a clumsy photo op. According to his friend, Salah Khashoggi has been under a travel ban since last year. Today, though, was about bridge building. Not only had he spoken to Turkey's president, sitting alongside him was Saad Hariri, the Lebanese Prime Minister, a man the prince is accused of detaining and forcing to resign last year. He joked he's not being kidnapped this time. Today was also about business. 30 deals worth more than $55 billion have already been signed, and he promised an even better future.
What did you think about the Crown Prince's comments today?
It's very inspiring to all of us.
What did you think about his comments about the question everyone's talking about, the investigation into the death of Khashoggi?
Transparency. This is the norm in Saudi.
Since being made Crown Prince, the man known as MBS has been basking in the international spotlight as a reformer. But since this issue, there have been questions about his authoritarianism, his sense of judgment, the people who surround him, his impetuousness.
But can he now rewrite the narrative and de-escalate the row that's engulfed him and the kingdom for the past 3 weeks?
Tim Wilcox with that report. The National MP in charge of workplace relations and safety says the conduct within his party shows no work environment is safe from bullying and harassment. Scott Simpson opened the final day of the Culture Shift conference in Wellington this morning. His appearance follows a tumultuous week for the National Party in the wake of MP Jamie Lee Ross quitting the party amid accusations of mishandled donations and bullying. Our employment reporter Katie Scotcher has been at the conference.
The Coromandel MP Scott Simpson addressed the conference, which is focused on workplace bullying and its impact, just days after Nationals leader Simon Bridges promised to review the party's culture. Despite the allegations of harassment against former National MP Jamie Lee Ross and the general chaos engulfing his party, Scott Simpson says he didn't have a problem speaking at the conference.
The political events of the last week or so just highlight that actually no organisation is immune. The real challenge for political parties, for political organisations and for all organisations is what have you got in place, what structures, what learnings, what processes are in place to prevent repeats.
Mr Simpson says it's imperative workers and their bosses talk openly about workplace bullying and harassment. So why wasn't that the case for the National Party?
For precisely the same reasons, for instance, that nobody was talking about these sorts of issues at Russell McVeigh prior to them coming to the fore. The nature of workplace bullying issues tends to be that until an issue arises and is confronted, then it's not talked about.
Director of Culture Safe, Alan Hulse, organised the conference. But he has had a tumultuous few months, facing 2 Employment Relations Authority complaints. One resulted in a $30,000 fine. Both complaints are for breaching confidentiality agreements, and he says the allegations are false. Alan Hulse says he stands by his decision to invite Scott Simpson to the conference.
I think it's a fair reflection to have somebody here. I know Scott himself is somebody who has a good history. I've checked him out. He doesn't have skeletons in the closet.
Mr Hulse says the behaviour of politicians over the last week has damaged New Zealand's culture.
Everybody's watching that behaviour, and unfortunately people joined in because they saw the behaviour of the politicians. They felt entitled to comment similarly.
The PSA's National Secretary, Glenn Barclay, told the conference workplace bullying is prevalent in the public sector. He says Parliament in particular is a pressurised work environment.
This is an example of a charged working environment, so in which relationships can be put under pressure. So I think that just needs to be managed carefully.
National intends to manage its internal review into its culture carefully as well. Simon Bridges says it's unlikely the findings will be made public. E te whanganui a tara mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scotcher aho.
The Waiwera thermal resort that's been enjoyed by Aucklanders for generations faces an uncertain future after the landowners kicked out the current operators and changed the locks. Now, the dramatic move comes after what they say is months of unpaid rent. The land the pools are on is leased from Waiwera Properties by the similarly named but completely separate Waiwera Thermal Resort, which is owned by businessman Mikael Kimmich. They've been closed for renovations since February, and all the staff were made redundant at that time. And the land housing the Waiwera water bottling plant has also been seized. A project director for the landowner, Evan Virtue, told our reporter Rowan Quinn they'd had enough.
We've had a consistent record of defaults now spanning pretty much 2 years. And we've just got to the stage now that as a normal commercial response, we have decided to, on the basis of the non-payment of current rent, have decided to cancel the lease, and we have re-entered the property.
So how often has rent been missed over that 2-year period?
Difficult right at the moment to give you a specific number, but we are talking about a consistent record over a 2-year period of at least in the order of probably 10 or so defaults.
And had you warned the business owner that this might be happening?
Yes, many times.
And what's the reaction from them been to the fact that you've retaken over the lease?
The reaction would be you'd have to say a very unhappy one. But it's simply something that they would probably have anticipated or must have anticipated in terms of the notices that they have had. And really what we've done is a very normal commercial response to a long history of defaults.
The property has been closed while the business does renovations on the resort. So what has been done in the way of renovations that you saw when you went back in this morning?
Very limited. In terms of what we understand was the intention, and we understand the intention was to open the facility by the beginning of December, and then that's been pushed back to Christmas. But the standard of the renovations is not well advanced at all from our understanding of this morning.
And we're getting lots of feedback from you on the story we ran earlier in the program, which was about e-scooters, these electric scooters, which are scooting around Christchurch and Auckland. Hi, Lisa. Although I'm right behind active transport, it seems very odd that these electric scooters, which can travel up to 25 k's or more, are allowed on the footpath, but kids riding a bicycle are not, and that's true. Footpaths are designed primarily for pedestrians, for non-motorised scooters, this person says, and scooters that are moving slowly. These scooters could be great, but their place is on the road with the rider wearing a helmet, just like cyclists riding a bike. And this one, listen to all those grumpy old wowzers. Bicycles would have got all the same complaints if they were invented today, this texter says. How many people die from chronic disease brought on by inhaling vehicle exhaust? Keep your feedback coming. We'll get to a bit more of it later in the show. But now a delightful animal story. A leopard seal has been stalking rowers in the western reaches of Auckland's Waitemata Harbour. This seal first appeared in the area last week, giving some people out on the water quite the fright. Our reporter Sarah Robson and visual journalist Dan Cook went out at the crack of dawn to try and spot the unusual visitor.
It's 6 in the morning at the Waitemata Rowing Club out on the Te Atatu Peninsula. The Auckland Rowing Performance Centre squad members have got their boats and oars out of the shed getting ready for another training session. But over the last week they've had some unexpected company out on the waters of the Waitemata Harbour. A leopard seal has found its way up the Henderson Creek and it's taken a keen interest in the rowers.
The seal just keeps coming back. The seal first showed its face a week ago when we were training, and then has been back every session since.
That's Amy Robson, who's one half of the women's double crew with Sophie Ignott-Johnson.
The seal likes to stalk us as we leave the pontoon in the morning and comes up super close and actually touched the nose of our boat yesterday. That was yesterday?
Yeah. So what happened when the seal nosed your boat?
Oh, I thought it was pretty cool, but Amy started freaking out.
And that seal-induced freak-out was caught by Amy's heart rate monitor.
We all get tracked with heart rate monitors and all of that, and we have to load it all up for the coaches to see and keep track of. And that session, you could see all the little spikes in my heart rate as it sort of kept coming closer and then ducking under the water and then popping up again.
But there was no sign of the seal during this morning's training session, and Jordan McLaren, who was out for a paddle in his kayak, didn't see it either. But he has been eyed up by the seal before.
Oh, the first time I was just paddling along and he sort of popped up next to me, gives you the old eyeball and sort of has a look around and then, swims off again.
And Jordan says it's a bit of a worry.
Definitely. I mean, it's about 3 metres long, and so it's a bit unnerving, especially when you sort of see the ripple in the water and he comes up and takes a look.
Tanya Edmonds, who was out this morning walking her dog Juno, says the seal's become a pretty popular local attraction.
There was hordes of people down here on Monday, and they were just streaming down all day through the day on Monday, apparently. There was a lot of photos on Facebook.
And she reckons when she saw the seal, it was looking pretty happy.
He was sunning himself up on the pontoon, just decked out over there on his tummy. And he was very cute because when I left at about 6, he was like upside down with his fins up in the air. And he was looking very cute.
She might have been cute, but she seemingly wasn't keen on media attention. But once the rowers were off the water and the boats were back in the shed, a shiny black head popped up near the pontoon. After a couple of attempts to haul itself up, the much talked about leopard seal finally flopped up onto the concrete. Marine mammal biologist Krista Hupman says the seal is no stranger to the Waitemata Harbour.
We know this seal very well. So this seal's name is Ophir, and she was actually named by the local iwi because of how important she is and how rare the sighting is. So her name actually means treasured gift from our ancestors.
Krista Hupman says we know it's the same seal because she has two distinct parallel markings on her back. Ophir was first seen in New Zealand waters in 2012, and since then she's been a regular visitor around Auckland and Whangarei. Leopard seals hail from the Antarctic and are usually pretty solitary creatures. But Ophir is a bit different.
I think she's a bit of an exhibitionist, actually, because she does actually like these public areas, and she definitely is very curious.
While she's never displayed any aggressive tendencies, Krista Hupman says people should keep about 20 metres away from Ophir if you spot her out sunbathing. And if you're out on the water and you come across her, don't panic and just treat her with respect. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
And there are some fantastic pictures of that seal in that piece from Sarah Robson. You can check them out on our Facebook page or go to our website page as well, and they're well worth a look. More of your feedback now, though, on the Lime scooters. This is a story we had earlier in the show about these electric scooters that have come into Auckland and Christchurch. They're on a trial. Some people not so happy. They go pretty fast. And one 80-year-old saying they almost got knocked over by one recently.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. The former Conservative Party leader, Colin Craig, is considering whether he will appeal part of a court ruling that found he sexually harassed his press secretary, Rachel McGregor. The judgment found he had been defamed by the whale oil blogger Cameron Slater, but Justice Toogood also ruled Mr Craig was guilty of moderately serious sexual harassment of Ms McGregor on multiple occasions from early 2012 to 2014. Mr Craig told Checkpoint while he's happy with his win, he disagrees with some of the detail about his treatment of Ms McGregor.
And so I have to decide to what extent I can live with the win or not. Some people say, well, quit while you're ahead. But within this are a lot of details, and some of those details I'm not happy with. I don't think that is the right outcome, and so I have to look at those and decide whether I want to appeal those findings or not.
Colin Craig. Hamish Carter has apologised to athletes and staff affected by his mistake in leaking confidential information to the national track cycling coach Anthony Peden. The Olympic triathlon gold medalist resigned from High Performance Sport New Zealand today after revealing he passed on what was supposed to be anonymous feedback to Peden. Carter, who was a campaign consultant manager, says he accepts full responsibility for what he describes as a genuine mistake. Peden resigned suddenly from his role in May. A subsequent review of Cycling New Zealand identified a culture of bullying, poor behaviour, lack of accountability and an inappropriate relationship within a dysfunctional high-performance program. 2 more suspected parcel bombs have been found in the US, addressed to the Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters, bringing the total number intercepted to 8. The pipe bombs have targeted a series of high-profile Liberal politicians and officials, including Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, along with CNN's offices in New York. Many commentators say it's a symptom of the political rhetoric promoted by the President Donald Trump. Mr Trump has condemned the actions, but at an election campaign rally, he called for more civility in politics and from the media.
The media also has a responsibility to set a civil tone and to stop the endless hostility and constant negative and oftentimes false attacks and stories. Have to do it.
Donald Trump. A huge manhunt is now underway to try to find who is behind the packages. In the wake of Super Typhoon Yutu, downed power lines and trees blocking roads are being cleared to get to devastated communities in the Northern Marianas. The Category 5 storm hit the islands of Tinian and Saipan, with winds gusting more than 350 kilometres an hour overnight. An official says initial reports indicate infrastructure damage is at a level not seen before in the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas. 2 injured people have been taken to hospital so far. KiwiRail's acting chief executive says slowing the speed trains go through Ngā Rua Wahia won't stop people walking along the tracks. 11-year-old Maureen Rameke was playing on the tracks in March when she was hit and killed by a train doing 60 kilometres an hour. The coroner overseeing Rameke's death asked KiwiRail to confirm whether trains can slow down in the area. KiwiRail's acting chief executive, Todd Moyle, says that could send the wrong message.
We understand that it's a rite of passage for people in Ngarawahia to jump off the bridge, but it's an incredibly dangerous environment. So we need to work within that. So we're going to take the next week just to understand all of those factors and see what is and isn't possible. We're desperate to keep people safe on the network in general, but particularly through there.
Todd Moyle says KiwiRail has already put cameras and fences around the track to deter residents from reaching the tracks, but it hasn't stopped them. A meeting in Wellington this evening will decide if a new Ngāpuhi mandate proposal should be put to the vote. The Treaty Negotiations Minister has been working all year with Ngāpuhi leaders to resolve the standoff over who should lead their treaty settlement. Leaders on both sides, Tū Horonuku and Te Kotahitanga, are meeting Andrew Little to decide if a new representation model is ready to go out to the people. The region's share markets are looking worse for wear with the news after the NZX came off lightly from a volatile day. The top 50 index closed down just 0.9% or by 74 points to 8,568. Australia's market is next to close in just under an hour after sliding down over 2% earlier today. The head of wealth research at Craig's Investment Partners, Mark Lister, says New Zealand hasn't hit a market correction yet, but Australia and Asian markets are in dangerous territory.
Generally thought of threshold for a correction as a 10% decline, and our market's down about 8.5% from its peak, so we're not far away. The Australian market, however, is in correction territory as of today. Likewise, the Japanese market and the Nasdaq in the US.
Analyst Mark Lister. It's 6:05. Sport. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen has made 5 changes to his starting lineup, including bringing in Damien Mckenzie and TJ Perenara for Saturday's third Bledisloe Cup test in Yokohama on Saturday. Hansen shuffled Ben Smith to the wing to make room for Mckenzie at fullback, while Perenara will start at halfback ahead of Aaron Smith. Ari Savia and Liam Squire are the starting flankers in place of injured pairs Sam Cane and Shannon Frizzell. At prop, Joe Moody returns from injury in place of Karl Tuanukuafe as part of an All Crusaders tight 5. Lock Brodie Retallick is on the bench, having recently overcome a shoulder injury, while Sonny Bill Williams is named at second 5 for what will be his 50th test. The Warriors will get to enjoy home comforts in the early rounds of next year's National Rugby League competition. 4 of their opening 6 games are in New Zealand, with a rare first-round home game at Mount Smart Stadium against the Canterbury Bulldogs to kick off their season on March the 16th. And the Boston Red Sox have beaten the Los Angeles Dodgers 4-2 in Game 2 of Major League Baseball's World Series and go 2-up in the best-of-7 series. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a window on the world of old recipes and the people recreating dishes first served up in ancient Rome. Must be getting cold by now. Alison Balance has the latest on the deadly plant disease myrtle rust, which alas does not seem to sleep. And this week's overseas correspondent Lien Huang is on the line from Vietnam. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells. Then a few showers this evening, clearing in Auckland and Coromandel tomorrow morning, and fine spells developing. Waikato to Wellington, including the central high country. A few showers turning to rain this evening, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Big Brisbane to Wairarapa, fine, but showers developing in Wairarapa this evening and elsewhere tomorrow morning, clearing in the afternoon, apart from the Hawke's Bay and Gisborne ranges. For Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, rain easing to showers this evening, then clearing tomorrow. Isolated afternoon showers inland for Canterbury tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, rain with heavy falls clearing this evening, a few showers developing tomorrow. Otago, rain easing to isolated showers this evening, then clearing about the coast tomorrow. Southland and Fiordland, a few showers clearing tomorrow morning, and the Chatham Islands cloudy with occasional showers tomorrow. It's 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. The Prime Minister says demoting Ministers Claire Curran and Meka Whaitiri has been one of her biggest challenges in her first year in government. Jacinda Ardern and her deputy Winston Peters gave an interview together today to mark the first anniversary of the formation of the coalition. Our political editor Jane Patterson asked them about New Zealand's relationship with Russia and China, and if there were plans for a cabinet reshuffle, and what had been the biggest test as coalition partners.
For me, the tests have actually been from a personal leadership perspective, things like losing members of the Labour team. That's been tough, because you don't work in a political environment and not get to know people, and you form relationships with the people you work alongside. But at the same time, I have a role to play in maintaining a standard within my team and within cabinet, and so having to make decisive decisions that involve the discipline of team members, that's a test. So for me, those have probably been more my lowlights rather than anything relative to the coalition.
Were there any actions you would have done differently with relation to the handling of your two ministers, given that there were, your leadership and your experience were questioned during those times?
I think actually probably every leader, when you go through those periods, faces those questions. I didn't feel like I was in a unique position because of it. But actually, there's always things that you can reflect on and say, well, I might have done X or Y differently, and to claim that you handle things perfectly 100% of the time, I think shows that you somehow think you're immune to those learnings. So I'm very openly said on, particularly clear, that there were things that I learnt from that experience, but ultimately I stand by the outcomes and decisions in both situations.
Jane also asked Ms Ardern if the coalition government was in agreement on the relationship between New Zealand and Russia.
Yes, we are.
Is there any...
Can I just make on the difference is this. If you're a lawyer and an inquiry starts, you usually consign your decision making to when the inquiry is over. The UK started an inquiry, and on day 2 the media was screaming out, well, why don't you condemn the Russians? And the inquiry hadn't even got underway. And so the lawyer sort of think, well, hang on a minute, I want to know what the facts are here. And in a way, with respect to Turkey and Saudi Arabia right now, it's been wise for us to sit here and wait to see what the Turks have been able to glean from their investigations. We are far better informed today than we were on day 1. Well, we could have jumped in and criticised the journalist being murdered. Now we can do it from a point of view of knowledge.
Jacinda Ardern and Winston Peters there speaking to our political editor Jane Patterson. Meanwhile, one of Labour's flagship policies was giving university students and trainees free fees this year, but many questioned whether they would treat studies seriously if they didn't have to pay for it. In the latest episode of Beyond the Beehive series, Max Toll and videographer Luke McPake visited Lincoln High School and Otago University to gauge what effect, if any, the policy had had on rangatahi's study.
Before last year's election, one of the Labour Party's key promises was making tertiary education free for new students this year. And beyond that, 3 years of free fees by 2024. We're heading to Lincoln High School, just outside of Christchurch, to meet Taylin Smith and Caleb Sim, 2 Year 13 students with a free period, to talk about their expectations for life beyond high school. So, Taylin, mock exams are coming up, are they?
Yep, in a week.
And do you know what you're going to be doing beyond this year?
I've got a scholarship to go over to China next year, so I get to go to a university in China and study there for a semester.
And beyond that, are you going to come back to New Zealand, or...?
I think in 2020 I will.
And you, Caleb?
I plan to go to Canterbury University next year to study software engineering.
Last year, the government introduced their free tertiary education policy. It's 1 year free fees at the moment. Have you been aware of this? Is this something you're stoked about?
Oh, I'm definitely aware of it, and it's definitely a good thing, I think, for me. It takes the pressure off.
Yeah, I agree with Caleb, because university is getting really expensive these days, and trying to find the money to put loans on houses and stuff, it will definitely help a lot, I reckon.
So you are thinking about
student loans and paying it up.
I think everyone going to university is conscious of that, yeah.
Do you have any friends or do you know anyone at school whose attitude towards tertiary education has been affected by this 1 year free policy?
No, I don't really think so. I think you need to know where you're going from an early age. It's almost like year 10 where you need to decide where you're looking to go, and if it's just a year before you go to uni, I think that affects people that are only going to study something just to study for the sake of studying, whereas people that have a career, they've already made their decision and they know what they want to do, and it either makes things easier or it doesn't affect them because they don't want to study at university.
You sound a lot more switched on than I did at high school. The free fees policy wasn't welcomed by everyone. Its critics said it would encourage dropouts with no intention of completing a course or a degree. We're at Otago University today to speak to students to find out if that's actually been the case. Government figures show that by April, over 33,000 students had taken advantage of the first-year fees-free policy, and student borrowing for fees is down. There were over 25,000 fewer borrowing in the first 3 months of 2018 compared to the same period last year. So your fees have been, I suppose, free this year. Has that sort of felt like the pressure's been off?
Yeah, in some ways it has, but in others I feel like I have to pass because it is free, so I want to make the most of it.
So I was always going to come to university, so in my perspective it sort of hasn't affected whether or not to come study, but it's just a massive advantage. Like, I've been talking to my boss from work, and he says that he's had a massive student loan and he's just turned 35 now, he's got a house, he's got 3 kids, and he's just paid it off, and so that's just one thing that's just going to, I guess, is going to help me out in the future, yeah. I suppose there was a criticism of this policy that there would be a large group of students who didn't take this year seriously, that there would be a large number of dropouts. Have you found that to be true with the people you know at all?
No, I honestly haven't found that with anyone. Yeah, because I did think so, and my mum's a sociologist and she kind of thought that as well and argued that. But everyone I talk to has seemed to really appreciate that we get this year free, and other people who are older, I can't believe you got this year free. Yeah.
Is there a little bit of maybe jealousy from older students?
Yeah, I think so. But I feel like it's good that they brought it in though, because for all the younger generations.
So far, so positive. But in search of a second opinion, we decided to venture down the nearby Castle Street, a student hub notorious for its couch burning and wild parties. Hamish, you're a second-year student. You missed the free fees boat by about a year.
Yep, that's right.
Does it sting pretty hard?
Yeah, it does somewhat. I mean, we were all pretty stoked to just be able to get into uni in the first place, but now that everyone can get in for free, I don't know, I think quite a few of us are pretty annoyed that we missed the boat.
Generally speaking, what's your opinion on the policy?
Well, I think that it shouldn't be the first year that's being everyone's getting it for free. I think it should be the second year, because and it gives you a bit of an incentive to actually get into that stage.
Do you know many first-year students? What's their attitude been towards it?
Well, some of them just kind of take it as a flag, yeah, and not really take it too seriously because obviously it's all free, but I think that there is definitely still the incentive to get into second year, obviously, but I don't think that it's as...
Pressure's off a little bit.
Yeah, it does pressure off a little bit, I think, yeah.
Back on campus, we met another first-year, Law and Māori Studies student, Jada. It's interesting that even though your course fees have been paid for, you feel like there's more pressure to succeed this year.
Just knowing it's coming from the government and coming from people who are paying for me, I feel like in a way I have to really try to give back to them. I think it's nice of the government to open this up for everyone.
Let's return now to our story about the Lime electric scooters. Auckland Council has ordered an urgent safety review into the e-scooters after a near miss involving Councillor Christine Fletcher. If you live in Auckland or Christchurch, you might have seen hundreds of these bright green electric scooters zipping around the cities, but they are causing some major hassles for motorists and some pedestrians. Christine Fletcher says it's only a matter of time before someone is killed. She came into the studio to tell me about her close shave with a scooter this morning.
I was walking across the Albert Street intersection, the pedestrian crossing there, and a motorised scooter came whooshing down on the road and then across the pedestrian crossing and nearly took me out. But fortunately, I jumped aside and all was well. But
when you say nearly took you out, what do you mean?
I heard him, because they're electric. If you're a skier, you'll know what it's like. When a snowboarder comes whooshing behind you, you just have a sensation that there is someone behind you. So I just sort of moved. But the thing was that I was going to the council. I've been watching these for the last few days, and we had extraordinary business, and I thought, well, this is a matter that we should discuss. I do not want to be a killjoy. I think that this technology is really exciting for Auckland, but we do need to have some protocols around safety that will protect everybody. So my thing was, what have we got in place? And the Mayor fortunately supported me and said, let's get a report on it.
Here's the thing, how do you know? Because they're allowed in shared pedestrian spaces, right?
Yeah.
How do you know that it wasn't you getting in the way of the scooter rather than the other way around?
Well, in this case, it was a pedestrian crossing where everyone was coming from a range of different directions. But
the scooters are allowed in pedestrian areas and on the footpaths.
I don't think it's intended that they go from the road to the footpath.
So he was ducking and weaving.
He was ducking and weaving. And look, I think they have their place. But just as on the water, you have a fizz boat that has to give way to a sail. I think if you're on a footpath or a pedestrian space, you have to give way to a pedestrian.
So when we talk about rules, you say there needs to be some more rules. What ones in particular?
I think if you're going to go at speeds of 27 to 30 kilometres an hour, they should have a helmet on.
But is that the only thing? What else? What else can we do, realistically?
I would like to feel that if they're on a footpath, they are not going to be going at speeds of more than 5 kilometres an hour.
What about lights on the bike, reflective gear, anything like that?
Lights and bells warning people that they're coming. I mean, many of these might just be
out of it, though.
I don't want to be a killjoy. I really don't want to be a killjoy.
Isn't that the joy of them? The sort of
freedom.
The freedom of just being able to...
We've taken away every other freedom. Yeah. This might be the only one.
Yeah, just the freedom of being able to clock on, jump on this little scooter and off you go. It takes cars off the road, arguably. It is eco-friendly, all the rest of it, and now we just want to slap a bunch of bureaucracy on people.
Lisa, it's compelling. And for all of those reasons, I want to see them being introduced, but I want to see them being introduced safely. When someone does get killed, there will be a huge witch hunt as to how this happened. I would like to feel that we can actually have the research beforehand and ensure that we have got the safest way in which we can introduce them for everyone's benefit.
Do you seriously think someone could get killed?
I do seriously think someone could get killed.
And as New Zealand hails its ratification of a long-awaited Pacific trade agreement, there's claims that Pacific countries are set to lose out financially, following criticism that the deal favours Australia and New Zealand over the small islands. There's now concern that it could also give strategic advantages to China. Mckenzie Smith reports.
Since its beginning nearly a decade ago, the PACER Plus agreement has been hailed by New Zealand as a win-win scenario for the Pacific. It was finally signed last year by New Zealand, Australia and 9 Pacific Island countries at a ceremony in Tonga. But it won't come into force until at least 8 of the 11 countries ratify it, and Trade Minister David Parker wants the others to follow his lead by the end of the year. He says it will create jobs and prosperity, but opposition has been simmering from some who say the deal will savage small island economies.
You see the language from Australia and New Zealand about this deal being a win for them because it secures their prioritised access, the market access to the region. That's not development for the Pacific, that's development for Australia and New Zealand industries.
That's Adam Wolfenden, a trade justice campaigner from the Pacific Network on Globalisation, or PANG. Yesterday, just hours after David Parker announced he'd ratified the agreement, the group released a highly critical report. In it, PANG says the small Pacific Island signatories stand to lose more than $60 million each year in government revenue if it goes ahead. While the group has long argued the tariff exemptions involved in the agreement will hurt Pacific Island countries, these are the first concrete figures provided. Adam Wolfenden says the deal needs to be rethought.
We think that the Pacific is probably better off to walk away from this deal and say that we want to actually have an honest conversation and a realistic conversation about what Pacific development could look like and how we go about enacting that.
Another opponent of PACER Plus is Cleo Pascal of the global think tank Chatham House. Dr Pascal says enforced free trade will undermine customary land rights and work against other domestic systems in Pacific nations. And once those economies are weakened, she says it will be China moving in to pick up the pieces.
You'll get Chinese government-backed companies, perhaps registered in Australia and New Zealand, that then go in, once those economies have been broken open, to bid for pieces of critical infrastructure like ports, like telecom.
Dr Pascal says the free trade agreement is also hurting New Zealand's reputation because it's seen as forcing other regional powers out. Fiji quit negotiations 2 years ago, saying New Zealand and Australia were inflexible and not focused enough on its development needs. Cleo Pascal says it's telling that Fiji and the other Pacific powerhouse, Papua New Guinea, as well as America's Pacific territories, have all stayed out of the agreement.
Pacer Plus is possibly one of the biggest strategic mistakes that Australia and New Zealand can do, and it's being watched very closely in other capitals, including DC and Delhi and Tokyo, all of which, for example, would be locked out under a Pacer Plus situation.
David Parker is in the United States and Canada on a trade mission and says the deal does have a focus on development and Pacific countries do have a direct say over how funds are spent. For Checkpoint, call Mckenzie Smith, Tēnei.
The Prime Minister says she's always been clear that she didn't want a regional fuel tax anywhere other than Auckland, a view she's also made clear to relevant ministers. Jacinda Ardern was accused of making up policy on the hoof when she declared to the House yesterday that there would be no other regional fuel taxes while she's Prime Minister. It took at least one ministerial colleague by surprise, that was Shane Jones. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The legislation in place prevents a regional fuel tax in any city other than Auckland until 2021. But Ms Ardern made this potentially more long-term pledge in the House yesterday.
I can give this guarantee to this House and to consumers: there will be no other regional fuel taxes while I am Prime Minister, which at the moment feels like it might be for a while.
Under pressure. A short time later, Shane Jones faced this question from National's Paul Goldsmith.
When did he, as Minister of Transport, know about this change of policy?
Mr Speaker, speaking on behalf of the Minister of Transport, when the Prime Minister stood up.
This morning, the Transport Minister Phil Twyford said he found out in a phone call from Jacinda Ardern yesterday. Today, Ms Ardern said it should have come as no surprise to any ministers, including Mr Twyford.
No, again, he was in the same Cabinet Committee where we had these discussions as well, and I made my view very clear, and in fact it's in legislation. Again, I should highlight, we put into law that no other region could access the regional fuel tax, and at the time we discussed the point we should put into law, the advice that we had was that it would be prudent just to hold ourselves to that commitment rather than bind future governments.
Mr Jones went back to the House this afternoon to make this correction.
As I was speaking on behalf of the Minister and not myself, the correct answer should have been that I, speaking as the Minister, was aware of this clarification yesterday morning. It was a matter of mixed personalities. Thanks, sir.
Mr Twyford told reporters there has long been discussion among ministers that only Auckland would have a regional fuel tax, but Ms Ardern told him over the phone yesterday morning she intended to make that clear in Parliament.
That's been her view all the way along. It hasn't been expressed publicly. And yesterday the Prime Minister clarified the position of the government that there would be no further regional fuel taxes on her watch.
He was questioned on whether that really was the case by National's Paul Goldsmith in light of communications Mr Twyford had with the Hamilton Mayor.
If in the future Hamilton City or the Waikato region wish to seek a regional fuel tax, I would encourage you to engage with officials at the Ministry of Transport. Officials will be able to provide guidance for any future applications, including that matters that will need to be considered and addressed to increase the likelihood of an application being approved.
We welcome discussions about the different options
for actually addressing the infrastructure deficit that we inherited after 9 years of that government.
This all comes on the eve of a Facebook campaign for a 24-hour boycott of petrol stations as prices continue to rise at the pump. More than 17,000 people have indicated they'll take part in the boycott, due to start at midnight tonight. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
And we're getting so much feedback from you this evening. This is about the Lime scooters, the electric scooters that are being rolled out in Christchurch in Auckland. This one, well, tells quite a harrowing tale. My 19-year-old son has broken his spectacles and is in for up to 3 days off work following a crash from a Lime scooter. 10 p.m, out at night with 2 mates. This person says they've also seen a young guy going flat out on a scooter, no safe gear, a young baby in a front pack with another lady following him in rush hour traffic, driving the wrong way down Blenheim Road. Someone will be killed soon, this person says. On the flip side, though, Paul says as someone with severe emphysema, the scooters will be a godsend. Taxis, he says, aren't thrilled about taking him just 3 or 4 blocks. Cindy, on the other hand, she says, I've tried one. It was fun, but I couldn't control it. I think that's the story that Christine Fletcher was telling us this afternoon. And she says she found that it went way too fast. This one is obviously from a farmer and makes an interesting point. I see city people with no experience, no training and very little financial commitment running amok in a busy street at dangerous speeds while wearing no helmets. Farmers, they say, who have decades of experience, have often attended safety and skills workshops, do not encounter unwary pedestrians, usually travel at much lesser speeds than these scooters can, but they are told they must wear helmets. And this one, in from Richard. Footpaths are for pedestrians, he says. Pedestrian crossings are for pedestrians, not cyclists or scooters going 20+ kilometres an hour. E-scooters should be on the road or cycleways and wear a helmet. Thank you for your feedback. Sorry we couldn't get to it all this evening. That is Checkpoint for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you listened on radio or watched on television. Check out all our stories online. Some great pictures there today. Have a fantastic evening, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The former Conservative Party leader, Colin Craig, has told Checkpoint he's considering whether he'll appeal part of a court ruling that found he sexually harassed his press secretary, Rachel McGregor. The Olympic triathlon gold medalist Hamish Carter has apologised to athletes and staff affected by his mistake in leaking confidential information to the national track cycling coach Anthony Peden. The Prime Minister insists she made the decision there should be no regional fuel tax in cities other than Auckland long before she declared it in the House, and it was not a case of making policy on the hoof. Storm wreckage has been cleared from roads in the northern Marianas Islands in the wake of Super Typhoon Yutu, which hit the region with winds gusting more than 350 kilometres an hour. And the New Zealand share market has recovered slightly